Well, we're calling January Vision Month. It's important for any organization to understand why it exists and what its mission is. So the first part of every year, if you go back and think about what we've done, we always spend the first month kind of either talking about where we've been and where we're going, or talking about the vision or something, just so we all understand. What are we here to do? What is it we exist for? Why do we come together on Sunday mornings? Why do we have an organization called Central Assembly? In order to accomplish anything great, everyone needs to be working together towards the same goal. If we all have something different that we want to get out of our relationship with this church, we're never going to accomplish anything, because we're all working for separate things. So we need to be on the same page. So that's why we're here this morning and this month, and hopefully by the time we're done, we'll know why we gather every Sunday. Yeah, I'm reminded of a story of two men that I heard. One man was out for his daily walk, and he noticed somebody struggling with a piano. So he asked his neighbor, he said, "Do you need some help?" Neighbor said, "Yes, that would be great. I've been working on this for an hour, and I can't get it to budge from this spot. It was just there straddling the threshold of the front door, and he couldn't move it." He said, "If you could help, that'd be great." So being a good neighbor, the man who was on his walk came to help with the piano. Well, after both of them struggling for over an hour, they were both exhausted, and the piano had not moved an inch. Finally, the man who volunteered to help said, "Man," I don't think we're ever going to get this piano in the house." And the man said, "In? I was trying to get it out." Sometimes we can think we're working together when actually we're working against each other. We have total opposite agendas. Both men had good intentions, but when one was pushing and one was pulling, they weren't getting anywhere. So that's why I think it's important for us to understand, what are we trying to accomplish so we can work together towards that same goal. That's why vision is so important. We need to understand the task at hand, what we're trying to accomplish. When people come together and work in unity towards a common goal, anything is possible. And I say anything, even if it's something bad. If you're working together towards a common goal, you can accomplish something. In the book of Genesis, we read about a group of people that understood this concept. Genesis chapter 11, verses 1 through 9. It says, "Now the whole world had one language and common speech. As people moved eastward, they found a plain in Shinar and settled there. They said to each other, 'Come, let's make bricks and bake them thoroughly.' They used brick instead of stone and tar for mortar." I don't know why that's important, but that part's in there. Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves. Otherwise, we will be scattered over the face of the whole earth." But the Lord came down to see the city and the tower that the people were building. The Lord said, "If as one people, speaking the same language, they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them." Let me read that again. If one people, speaking the same language, have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. "Come, let us go down and confuse their language, so they will not understand each other." So the Lord scattered them from there over all the earth, and they stopped building the city. That is why it was called Babel, because the Lord confused the language of the whole world. From there, the Lord scattered them over the face of the whole earth. This group of people understood the goal. They talked about it. They said, "Let's accomplish something together. Let's build this tower." Unfortunately, they were building the tower for their own glory. They said, "Let's build a name for ourselves." They wanted something that other people would look at and say, "Look how talented these people were. Look what they did. Look at this tower they built." They were trying to build a name for themselves, and that's not why we're here. We're not here to build a name for ourselves. We're here to build a name for God, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. They had man goals, not God goals. They had vision, but it wasn't God vision. They weren't getting their cues from God. So even though their vision was not correct, they were being successful. They were accomplishing something because they were working together. God said, if they understood that concept, that working together we can do this, nothing will be impossible. And I think that's why a lot of churches never grow. A lot of churches never do anything because everybody has a different goal. Everybody's there for their own agenda. Everybody has their own way of how they think it should work and what should be done, and this is what we need to do, and everybody's working different directions, so the church never moves forward. I don't want us to be like that. I want us to be on the same page, moving towards the same vision, and hopefully it's a God vision, a God goal. I see several faces here I don't recognize, so this is actually a good Sunday, a good month for you to be here, okay? Because you're going to find out what is our vision. What do we think we're here to accomplish? And if you share that vision, join us. Help us move this thing forward. If you say, nah, that's not how I picture church, that's not what I want out of a church, then maybe you need to seek elsewhere. Because we need to be on the same page. We need to have the same vision if we're going to accomplish anything great for the kingdom of God. So over the next few weeks, I'm going to share some simple words that I believe is God's vision for this church. If we can all learn these words and understand what they mean, and we start working together to accomplish those things, then I believe we will see great things happen, not just in this church, but in our city and state and in the world beyond. Today, I want to talk about our purpose or vision as a church. And for some of you, you're going to recognize it. It's nothing new because we've been talking about this for 3 years. For some of you, you might go, wow, that's kind of cool. And some of you say, I don't know if I want to be a part of that. Then after that, I want to introduce some new words that are going to be new to most of you. I've talked to a few people about it. A few people are excited about it. That is going to help us understand how we accomplish what I talk about today. Today is vision. This is what we're here to do. And then I want to introduce how we're going to accomplish that. Because it's not just good enough to set a goal. This is what I want to do. How are you going to do that? If you set a New Year's resolution to lose 20 pounds this week, you have to, or not this week, this year, 20 pounds this week would be kind of difficult. If you set a New Year's resolution, you're going to lose weight. It's not good enough. We talked about that last week. We can decide we're going to do something, but we have to put something behind that. We have to put action that. We have to have a plan for it. How am I going to accomplish that? Well, we're probably going to have to change our diet. We may have to get a health club membership or at least start exercising or walking or something. We have to have a plan. It doesn't just happen. We can have all the good intentions, but if we don't have a plan behind it, how are we going to make it happen? It's not going to work. So you may have noticed that there were 3 new signs put in the lobby over the Christmas holidays. Who can tell me the 3 small phrases that are written on those 3 signs? I see 2 hands. How many noticed the signs? You got a couple. What signs? Okay. How many can tell me what's written on those signs? Not as many. Nikki, what do those 3 signs say? Okay. Wrong order, but yeah, basic concept. Love God, love people, share Christ. That is our mission. That is our vision. Now, I had several people that talked to me. They go, oh, I love those signs. Those look really good there. It kind of ties everything together. It makes everything look like it belongs. That's beautiful. And I love those 3 phrases. Love God, love people, share Christ. How did you come up with that? Where did that come from? And I'm thinking, we've been talking about this for 3 years. 3 years ago, January, I stood up here in Vision Month, and I said, the board and I have talked about it. We searched scriptures, and we prayed, and we tried to come up with a real simple to understand. What are we here for? Why do we exist? What is our mission? And it all boils down to 3 things. Love God, love people, share Christ. Everybody get your bulletin if you have your bulletin. Look at the bottom of your bulletin. What do you see down there? Love God, love people, share Christ. Our church sign, what does it say on the bottom of the church sign? Love God, love people, share Christ. Our visitor pamphlet, if you're a visitor, first thing I want people to know when they come, and on our website when people check out the church, it says we exist to love God, love people, share Christ. Some of you are familiar with these little cards we have out there. You pass them out all the time. I know some of you do. Some of you haven't done anything with them, but some of you tell me, I got to get more cards. I've been passing these out everywhere. I've been leaving them on the table in the restaurants. What does that card say on the front? Love God, love people, share Christ. That is what we are called to do. Those 3 simple things is our vision. And we're going to be very more active in saying that all the time. We're going to say it until you're sick of it. Man, yeah, we've heard that. Okay, you've heard it, but can you repeat it back to me? Until every person in this room can repeat it back to me. We haven't communicated it enough. So we're going to find more ways of displaying it where it's visual. We're going to find more ways of saying it. That is what we're here to do. And until we can speak the same language and have the same goal, love God, love people, share Christ, we're wasting our time coming together every Sunday, because that's why we come. To love God, love people, and share Christ. So let me see if you've got it yet. Why do we exist? Very good. Now somebody might be asking, it's a good question, who decided that would be our mission statement? Well, I've already kind of alluded to that. I came up with it after searching scriptures and praying about it. I presented it to the board 3 years ago, a little over 3 years ago, and said, hey, this is what I think we need, because we didn't have a mission statement at that time. It's just, we're just going to, I mean, the closest thing to a mission statement we had was just a church for all people, a church for all God's people. And I think that's something Caitlin had come up with and just started putting out there. Is that way for that? Okay. Just a church for all God's people. You know, then I said, let's take the God off of there, because really a church for all people we want to be. I mean, we want other people to come in. It's not just for God's people. You don't have to be a believer to come. Hopefully we have unbelievers that come and fellowship with us on Sunday morning, because that's part of our mission. Share Christ. How can we share Christ if they're not here? So we changed that just to a church for all people. But there's got to be more than that. What does that say? It's not really a vision. I mean, it's okay, we're a church, okay? But why are we here? We need more than that. So I was praying about it, came up with that. The board and I prayed about it. We decided that was the thing. But it didn't originate with me. It actually originated with God. And that's what I want to share with you this morning, is why did we get that? How can I say that originated with God? There are 3 big things in the Bible that Jesus commanded us to do. If you boil it all down, look at all the things that Jesus taught and all the things that Jesus said. Actually, it's not just Jesus, because Jesus alluded back to the Old Testament. There are 3 main concepts in the Bible. Lots of things in there, but they all boil down to these 3 things. Love God, love people, share Christ. There are a lot of instructions in the Bible. How many figured that out? A lot of thou shalt, and a lot of thou shalt nots. I had a friend that said one time, he said, before he became a Christian, he thought, there's no sense even trying, because I've kind of looked at the thing, and there are so many things in there that I'm not supposed to do. There's so many thou shalt nots. He goes, there is no way I can memorize all those. If I can't do something right, I'm not going to do it at all. And there's just way too many things I can't memorize. So why even try? And then he said, after he became a believer, he found out there's a lot more do's in the Bible than there are don'ts. So he said, if I just start working on the do's, I don't have to worry about the don'ts. But even the do's, can we memorize all the do's? Can we do all of those? And Jesus had the same problem in his day. There were so many rules, and people said, how can we keep track of all of them? It's impossible to please God, because we got to remember all of these things. All of us have our favorite rules, right? We've got things that we memorize, and this is the way I was raised, or this is the way I see it, and this is the way it is. So this is what I'm going to do, and this is what everybody else has to do. If you love God, you got to do this. And we even can quote the scripture to back that up. And right here, it says, thou shalt not, or you can't, or you can, or you should, or we have that memorized. But we're focusing so much on that one thing that we're neglecting everything else. And we think, if I can just be good at that one. That's what they were doing in Jesus' day. They decided there's no way to memorize them all, so they decided, if each of us can just pick one of the 10 commandments, and we can follow that one commandment perfectly, then we'll be considered righteous. Forget the rest. If we can just follow one, how many think you could follow one perfectly? You can't even follow one perfectly. But that's what they thought. If I can just do one, I can ignore the rest, because God will only judge me on this one, because this is the one that I thought was the important one. Let's forget the others. Jesus taught we can't forget the others. They're all tied together. But he didn't tell us we have to memorize them. There's nothing wrong with memorizing and reading the Bible and seeing what it says. But he said, don't even worry about that. Let me make it simple for you. We fall into 2 categories. Since there's so many instructions that there's no way we can memorize them, we either give up and say it's impossible, like my friend did before he finally came to the realization that he didn't have to be perfect. We either give up and decide there's no worth even trying, or we say, well, I'm just going to do like they did that back then, and I'm just going to pick certain ones to follow. But if we're brutally honest with ourselves, most of us fall in that second category. We have rules that are important to us. And we think since it's important to us, it should be important to everybody else. Everybody else needs to interpret it the way that I interpret it and do it the way that I do it. The Pharisees came to Jesus to test him. They all argued constantly when they get together for their gatherings. They would argue about who should do this and who should do that and what you should do and what you shouldn't do. That person's not dressed properly. That person used a word that they shouldn't have used. That person's hair's not the right length or the wrong color. I don't know if they had that problem back then. They argued about who was more spiritual based on whether you were keeping the right rule or the right law or something. And so they came to Jesus and they said, in Matthew chapter 22, verses 35 to 40. Now, notice it says these were experts in the law. Okay, these guys, they had studied. They were experts. They knew it better than everybody else, at least in their own minds. Matthew chapter 22, 35 to 40, it says, one of them, an expert in the law, tested him, Jesus, with this question. Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law? And this man had his own, and he wanted to see if Jesus agreed with him so he could tell him, see, I told you so. Or so he could decide whether or not he was going to listen to Jesus further, because if Jesus disagreed with him, then there's no sense listening to Jesus, because Jesus has to be wrong, because I'm right, right? We're all right. Everybody else is wrong. Which is the greatest commandment? Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. The second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and prophets hang on these two commands. Essentially what Jesus said is, let's make this simple. You guys are fighting over all these little things, but it really comes down to only two. Just remember two things. Don't try to remember, because there were thousands. There were the 10 Commandments, and then there were all these other rules and regulations that came along with those, telling them how to keep those 10 Commandments. And then they had added their own interpretations and their own things on top of that. There were thousands and thousands and thousands of rules. Jesus said, let's make it simple. Just remember two things. Love God, love people. Because if we love God, we don't need a commandment that tells us not to use his name in vain. Because we love him. We don't want to use his name in vain. If we love God, we don't need a rule that tells us he should be number one in our lives. We don't have to have a rule that says nothing else should be more important. Because we love him with our whole heart, our whole soul, our whole mind. It comes naturally. We don't need those rules. And then he went on and said, there's a second one. Notice he said, is like it. Sometimes you say equal to it. You can't separate the two, because if we love God, we have to do what he said, and he said, love people. Also, if we love God, we have to love what he loves, and he loves people. God so loved the world, people, okay? So if we love God, we must love what he loves. We must love people. So the second one is equal. It's the same. They're together. You can't separate them. If we love people, we don't need a rule that says don't tell a lie about somebody. Because when we lie about somebody, is that showing love to them? If we love people, we don't need a law that says don't take something that belongs to somebody else. Because we love them. We won't do that. If we love people, we don't need a rule that says don't be jealous, don't covet. If they get something good, don't say, that's not fair, I wish I had that. Because we love them, we want them to be blessed, we want them to have good things, so we rejoice with them instead of coveting what they have. So Jesus said, you're making it way too complicated. Just remember, love God, love people. If you do those two things, if every time you get ready to say something, or every time you sit down at your computer to type something, you simply ask the question, is what I'm about to say showing love for God and showing love for people? All people, okay? Not just those who like me in return, not just those who would repay the same way I'm doing something, because Jesus said we're also supposed to love our enemies. See, it's easy to say good things about people who say good things about us, and people who treat us right, and people who like the same things that we like. How about those people who don't treat us right? Who say bad things about us? See, just because they're not following this doesn't mean we're exempt from following it. The Bible doesn't say do unto others because they do unto you, or do unto others as they do unto you. It says do unto others as you would like it to be done with you. Treat everybody basically the way you would treat Jesus if Jesus were there. Would we say the things about Jesus that we say about other people? Would we even think the things about Jesus that we sometimes think about other people? So we ask ourselves a question: what I'm about to do, what I'm about to say, if I do this or say this, will this be showing love for God? And will this be showing love for people? If the answer is no to either of those questions, we shouldn't be doing it. What I'm about to do, is this going to show love for God? And is this going to show love for people? Jesus said the second commandment is like the first. It's equal. It's connected to the first. If we love God, we have to love people. We can't separate the two. It's not take your pick. Either love God or love people. They're connected. We can't love God without loving people. Why not? Because the Bible tells us so. 1 John chapter 4, verses 7 and 8. Dear friends, let us love one another, for love comes from God. Everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love, now let's talk about loving other people. Remember, it said love one another. Whoever does not love, we could put one another in there, or we could say whoever does not love people does not know God, because God is love. If we love God, we have to love people, because his love is in us, and his love compels us to love people. A little further on in verses 11 and 12, he says, dear friends, since God so loved us, we also ought to love one another. No one has ever seen God, but if we love one another, God lives in us, and his love is made complete in us. There's nothing wrong with trying to memorize all the commandments and follow them. We should want to follow all the commandments. In fact, in another place it says, if you love me, keep my commandments, plural. But if we just love God and love people, we automatically do those other things, and we don't need to have a list, because all of us should be intelligent enough to figure out when what we're saying is showing love or not, because we know how we would feel if somebody said that about us. And we should be intelligent enough to know, if I do this, is it showing love? Because we know how we view somebody else if they do that same thing. It's not rocket science. It's pretty simple. Does this love God? Does this love people? Those two commands are why we were created. We were created to love God and love people. It's why we exist. Those two commands actually apply to everyone, not just those in the church. Even those outside the church, that's really why they were created. Now, they're not here this morning to hear this and hear me explain it to them, but God's desire is for everyone to love everyone and to get along and to be unified and not be bickering and fighting. But at least for us here that have the Bible to follow, we should understand this. Love God. Love people. That's why I'm here. That's my whole purpose. My purpose on earth is not to build a kingdom for myself like those who are building a Tower of Babel. It's not to get glory for myself. My purpose is to love God and bring glory to him. And by serving other people and loving other people, I'm helping glorify my Father. That is why I exist. It's not about me. It's about him. Our mission and command, both as individuals and as a corporate body of believers, is to love God and love people. Now, the third part of our mission statement comes from the last command that Jesus gave us just before he left earth and went back to heaven. Okay, these were the really, if you boil it down, these were the only two commands Jesus gave. And everything he did fit these, showing love for his Father and showing his love for people. But just before he left, he said, I'm going to give you a new command. Now, this one you're not even going to find back. I mean, it's kind of alluded to back there, but you're not even going to find this as part of the Ten Commandments. It's not in the Old Testament. I want to give you a new commandment. He didn't call it a commandment, but we call it a commission. We call it the Great Commission, which means great commandment. Mark chapter 16, verse 15. He, Jesus, said to them, go into all the world and preach the gospel to all creation. The word gospel means good news. You don't find it in the newspaper. The good news is about Jesus. This is the same good news that the angel proclaimed to the shepherds in Luke chapter 2. Luke 2:10, the angel said to them, do not be afraid, I bring you good news. What was the good news? I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all the people. The good news is Jesus, Emmanuel, God with us. God in human form. God has come to show his love. That's the good news. Go into the whole world and preach the gospel, the good news, the news about Jesus with all creation. The good news is that Jesus came to take our punishment and make it possible for us to have a relationship with Father God. The good news is that we don't have to spend an eternity in hell. We can confess our sins and accept the penalty that Christ paid and spend an eternity in heaven instead of going to hell. Nobody has to go to hell. But if we don't love people enough to share the good news, people are going to find themselves there. And many will anyway, because they'll reject the good news. But if we love them, will we give up? Or will we keep sharing? The Great Commission is a separate command that was given by Jesus, but it's actually an extension of the other two. When we love someone, it's natural to talk to them. And it's natural to talk to them about things that we're passionate about and really things that we think are important. And it's natural for us to warn people about danger. If we really love God with our whole heart, with all our mind and all our strength, we're not going to be able to keep it inside. We're going to have to share with people because that's our love. That's what we love. If we love fishing, what do we talk about? We talk about fishing. If we love hunting, what do we talk about? We talk about hunting. If we love macrame or crochet or knitting or flowers or gardening or whatever, what do we talk about? We talk about the things we love. If we're not talking about Jesus, if that's not just part of our regular conversation, if it's not showing up on my Facebook feed, then do I really love him? Because we naturally talk about things that we love. Everybody agree with me? It's natural. If we love something, we talk about it. But if we really love people, even if we take that out of the equation, if we really love people, then we don't want something bad to happen to them. We're going to do anything we can to protect them from danger. If we love our family and we're afraid that somebody's going to come into our house at night, we do something to protect them. We put an alarm system on the house. Maybe we purchase a firearm or something. We do something because we don't want harm to come to our family. We do whatever we can to keep that harm. If we really love somebody and we really believe that hell is a real place and that it's the only alternative to heaven, why would we let somebody go there? We would say, you are not on my watch. Now, you have to accept, you have to make your own decision. But I am going to do everything. And if you reject me the first time, I'm sorry. You may get tired of me sharing Christ. You may get tired of it and say, you've already told me. But I am compelled. I have to tell you because I don't want you to spend an eternity in hell. I can't help myself. I have to share the good news. Some of you might be familiar with the famous magic duo Penn and Teller. How many rings a bell? Penn and Teller. Penn Jillette is a staunch atheist. He makes no bones about the fact that he doesn't believe in God. He has no qualms trying to persuade other people that there is no God, and if you believe in God, that's fine. You can believe whatever you want to, but you're believing in something that doesn't exist because I don't believe that God exists. He has no problem with that. But he has trouble understanding why someone who believes in God would not be just as adamant or even more adamant about sharing Christ as he is of professing his belief that there is no God. A few years ago, he shared a story about why Christians should share their faith. He told a story about someone that came up to him after one of his magic shows. He said the guy was about his same age and had participated in one of the acts as an audience member. The man complimented Gillette on the show, and then he said, I brought this for you. And the man held up a small book. It was the New Testament with the Psalms. Maybe a Gideon Bible. Maybe this man was a Gideon. It was something that could fit in a pocket. The man said, I wrote in the front of it, I want you to have this. The man explained, I'm not crazy. I'm a businessman. I'm not a kook. Okay, I'm normal. But I love you. And I want you to have this. Please read it. Now, Gillette's an atheist. Was he offended? And I can't say all atheists are going to take it the way he did. But this is his take on it. Gillette, moved by the man's gesture, recalled. He was kind and nice and sane. He looked me in the eyes. He talked to me. And then he gave me this Bible. I've always said, Gillette explained, that I don't respect people who don't proselytize. Does everybody know what that means? Proselytize means trying to share your faith, trying to get somebody else to believe what you believe. That's what proselytize. That's what people do when they come to your door and want to share their faith. They're proselytizing. He says, I've always said, I don't respect people who don't proselytize. I don't respect that at all. If you believe there is a heaven and hell, and people could be going to hell or not getting eternal life or whatever, and you think it's not really worth telling them because this would make it socially awkward, how much do you have to hate somebody not to proselytize? That's his words. An atheist. He's okay, I may not believe the same way you do. I may reject what you say. But how much do you have to hate someone to not proselytize? How much do you have to hate someone to believe that everlasting life is possible and not tell them that? Gillette then offered his example to illustrate his point. He said, if I believe beyond a shadow of a doubt that a truck was coming at you, and you didn't believe it, but the truck was bearing down on you, there's a certain point that I would tackle you. And this thing that you claim to believe is more important than that. He says, this guy was a really good guy. He was polite, honest, and sane. And he cared enough about me to proselytize and give me a Bible. Now, Gillette still, to my knowledge, has never accepted Christ. We need to pray for him. We need to pray that other people will reach out to him like this man did. That at some point he'll come to the place where he'll realize he'll open the Bible, he'll read the words for himself. But even he says, if you really believe it, put your money where your mouth is. Do we really believe that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life? Do we really believe that there's a heaven and there's a hell, and that those who don't accept Christ will spend an eternity in hell? Do we really understand how bad hell is? If we really understood how bad it is, we wouldn't want anybody, even our enemies, to go there. Because even our enemies have never done anything bad enough to really deserve that. Love people. And because of our love for people, we share Christ. It should be a natural extension of what we do. I mean, think about it. We seem to have no problem talking to people about other things. We can talk about politics. We can talk about the weather. We can talk about our hobbies, our families. But when it comes to talking about the only thing that really matters, we run. We go to the other side of the street so we can avoid the conversation. We say we love people, but we're content to let them go into eternity without God. If we were of the Hindu faith, it would make sense not to share. Because if somebody doesn't get things right in this life, they'll have another life to do better. If we were of the Baha'i faith, it makes sense that we wouldn't feel obligated to share, because in the Baha'i faith, it doesn't really matter what you believe as long as you believe in something. So you don't agree with me? Great, you believe in something, so all paths lead to God, so who am I to tell you there's only one way? Believe whatever you want to. Even if I was a Mormon, it would make sense. But this is what baffles me, because they're the ones that are really out doing it. They're the ones that are proselytizing. But the Mormons believe in 3 levels of heaven. Now, they're out doing what they're doing because they want to be in that top level. But the rest of us, we're already going to level 2. They believe that level 2 of heaven is for anyone who is basically a good person. How many in here would say that describes me? Basically, I'm a good person. I'm not perfect, but basically, I'm a good person. If you're basically a good person, you can make it to the second heaven as long as you accept Christ after you die. Even if you rejected him while on earth, as long as you were a good person, you'll have another chance after you die, and you can accept him then. Let's become Mormon. Should we just change and change? Because that's easier, isn't it? So it makes sense. I don't feel an obligation to tell you because you're a good person, so you're going to at least make it to second level heaven. You're not going to hell. And if you're not going to hell, your second level heaven may not be first level, but it's still a good place. You're okay. So I don't have to share my faith with you. But that's not the way it is. If we're here in this church, crack, my voice is changing. If we're here in this church, we believe that there is a heaven and there is a hell. And the only way to get to heaven is to accept Jesus Christ. If you don't accept Jesus Christ in this life, before you die, there's only one other alternative: hell. Do we believe that? If we believe it, then how can we not share Christ with people? What was it that Penn Jillette said? He said, how much do you have to hate somebody to not proselytize? How much do you have to hate someone to believe that everlasting life is possible and not tell them that? Our mission is simple. Love God, love people, and share Christ. That's why we exist. That's why we gather on Sundays, so we can love God more, so we can meet new people that we can love, and so that we can be challenged and encouraged and even cattle prodded if necessary to go out and do the last part. Share Christ. If that's what you feel you need to do, I'm going to try my best to help you learn how to do that. And we're going to be talking about some of that. How do we go about that the next few weeks? You need to come back. But if you don't agree with that mission, if you say, no, church is just will be a place where I can go and feel good and just meet my friends and say, yeah, okay, we did the church thing. If that's why you're coming, this may not be the church for you. Because we're going to be pushing. We're going to be teaching. We have a mission. We have a job. This is why we exist. Let's start speaking the same language. Let's start working towards the same goal. Let's start doing what God wants us to do. Let's love God, love people, and share Christ. That is our mission. What is God's purpose for me as an individual? What is it? Love God, love people, share Christ. What's the mission of Central Assembly? Why does Central Assembly exist? Love God, love people, share Christ. That's simple. We're going to be saying it over and over and over again. I challenge you guys, on your way out of here, find 2 or 3 people. Make sure they understand it. Make sure they got it down. Ask them, why do we exist? Why do we come together? What's our purpose? Have them repeat it back to you. They need help, coach them on it. And I want it to be a place where I can ask any one of you at any time, why do we exist as a church? What is our mission? And I want the answer to be to love God, to love people, and share Christ. Until we understand that, we're not going to go anywhere. We need to understand that. Next week, I'm going to start sharing for 3 weeks 3 ways that we are going to accomplish that. 3 strategies, if you will. Because, again, you make a resolution. If you don't have strategy behind how are we going to do that, it's not going to happen. So I've come up with, again, I think some God ideas on how we're going to put that into practice. Because if we just say that's what we're supposed to do, we say, oh, I know I'm supposed to do that. How do I do it? How does it work? We're still not going to get anywhere. We have to put some action, some feet behind our decisions. So please join me the next few weeks. The reason we gather is because of our love for God and because of our love for people. Sometimes you might have the opportunity to share Christ with somebody on Sunday morning, and I always want to give an opportunity for anyone who doesn't know Christ, because if we have new faces come in, I don't know where they're at spiritually, so I always want to give that opportunity. Maybe you'll meet somebody shaking their hand, and they'll start asking you questions. Somebody will be obvious that they don't know Jesus. You can say, hey, can I take you out to lunch? I want to get a little bit of acquainted. During that conversation, you can share Christ. It can be an extension of this, but most of that's not going to happen here. Most of that's going to happen out there as we build relationships with people. But the reason we gather is because we love God. We love people, and we want to learn how to love God and how to love people more. And it all goes back to the sacrifice that Jesus made on the cross. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have eternal life.